Have you ever seen these strange purple flowers growing all over your yard and wondered what they are and maybe if you can eat them? Well, you can. And these are actually not one, but two different species of wildflowers. One of them makes one of my favorite wildleteas, and the other one is kind of meh, honestly. So I'm going to show you how to distinguish them and how I use this one. These are two of the best plants to start out with if you are new to foraging or plant identification, because they're very common and they're both safe to use. So first, let's find out what their names actually are. So these two plants are closely related. They're in the same group that are often called the dead nettles. How do they get that name? Well, they bear some resemblance to true stinging nettles, despite the fact that they don't sting. The first one is called purple dead nettle. Its scientific name is Lamium purpureum. Now, you don't always need to know the scientific name, but it does help us in certain cases. For instance, another common name for it is red dead nettle, which is also Lamium purpureum. So it kind of helps to clear up some confusion. The other one is called henbit, and it gets its name because people would often observe that chickens really love to eat it. And if you ask me, that is a great use for it, feeding it to the chickens. Its scientific name is Lamium amplexicoli, and I would love to nerd out with you on this for a second. If we look at the species name, amplexicoli, it comes from the plant term amplexicol. Amplexicol further breaks down to the Latin amplexus and caulis. Amplexus means embracing or twining around, and caulis means stem. So we have embracing or clasping to the stem, which is an identification feature of henbit that we'll talk about in a moment. So oftentimes, if we learn a little bit more of the background of these names, it will give us important distinguishing characteristics for these plants. So speaking of identification, let's take a closer look at that for both of these plants. I think that these are some of the best to start out with if you are new to foraging and plant identification. Because when you're just starting, they can seem really similar. I even remember myself, this was one of the first plants that I learned how to identify when I didn't know anything about plants and I was just starting with foraging. And I knew that there was something that was different about them, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. So don't worry, because I'm going to show them to you, and the next time you see them, it's going to jump out at you. First though, I want to actually talk about the things that are similar between them. These both being in the mint family, they have a square stem, and if you run them between your fingers, you can really feel it too. They have an opposite arrangement, leaves come off at the same point. They have hairs on them to varying degrees over the leaves and the stems, and they both have purple flowers with a somewhat tubulous or tube-like structure to them. Now, let's look at the things that are different between them. First, when we're looking at the flowers, on henbit, they have a much more upright or vertical stature compared to dead nettle, where the flowers are much more horizontal or pointing outwards. Dead nettle also has somewhat heart-shaped leaves that are usually about as long as they are wide. It'll be difficult to tell which one is more. And the edges are only somewhat serrated or scalloped, compared to henbit, where the leaf edges are much more deeply serrated or scalloped. They are not heart-shaped, and usually they'll clearly be much longer than they are wide. But the last detail, to me, this is the easiest way to tell them apart, and we learned about it a little bit before. On henbit, the leaves are clasping directly to the stem. On purple dead nettle, they're stalked. So there's a little stem that leads to the leaf that's called a petiole. Look for that one, it's very clear, and it will easily separate them. In terms of lookalikes, I really can't think of many, and that's another reason why they're so safe for beginners. Certainly not ones that are toxic, but one that comes to mind would be a plant called creeping Charlie. So right off the bat, the growth habit is very different. As you imagine from the name, it's creeping, crawling, or vining compared to the more upright henbit and dead nettle. The leaves are more round, and also, though the flowers can somewhat appear similar, with creeping Charlie, they will often come in groups of 2, 3, I've even seen them in 4. And that is not a feature that we see in henbit or dead nettle. So now let's talk about how I like to use these plants. As I've been alluding to, I just have not found a way that I personally like to have henbit. No way at all whatsoever. So if you have chickens, feed them to them. They would love them, and I certainly don't. But that is not true for dead nettle. Now, I've done some culinary experiments myself to see if I could find a way that I like to eat them. And I'll be honest with you, I couldn't. However, a friend of mine, JB with the Wild Grocery, he just put out a newsletter that talks more about it, and he's better with all this culinary stuff than I am, so I'll point you to his work in the description. But I'll tell you what I do absolutely love to do with dead nettle. I look forward to this every single year, which is to make tea with it. Now pay attention here, because if you do it in the wrong way, it will be very disappointing. The main thing that you must do is you must dehydrate the leaves. You can use a dehydrator, you can leave them out in a setting where they'll have lots of good airflow. Whatever you need to do to get them dry, it's going to really, really improve the flavor. If you use them fresh, it's overall just going to be kind of like really planty and disappointing. Not good in my opinion. So once you've gotten them dried, I simply just use my hands and I rub them to crush them up into smaller pieces. And then I'll add them to a glass, and I usually want to use quite a bit of herb compared to the water. You'll see in the footage that I'm showing you, it's actually not as much as I would have normally done. Normally I would have done a lot more to get a nice full flavor. Then I'll pour over boiling water, and I'll leave it to steep for 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes even half an hour. It really can't be too long. Then I'll strain it out and I will enjoy. I absolutely love the flavor and the feeling of drinking this tea. It's very hearty and nourishing and calming, and I love everything about it, and I think that you'll like it a lot too. But while you're out there in the field looking for this plant, there is another common weedy plant that grows in your yard that has a bit of an oniony aroma to it, and you might be wondering if you can eat that. So I'm going to tell you all about it in this video right here. I don't think that you want to miss this one, and I hope to see you there.